Very powerful. And we are talking about understanding what our wives, partners go through, especially through the renting journey. It's very interesting that if you miss one point, especially from the day one, you will actually not get the point delivering support that is needed in that particular case. And now, in our African setting, we are told just back off, give her time. I've heard somewhere people saying actually when the baby is here, the dad is supposed to be away and let the mother take care of the baby. So how are we breaking these stereotypes? I know you've already mentioned about maybe feeding the baby when the mom is resting, but maybe what other stereotypes have you seen in this particular conversation, and how can we break them or build around them?
One time I was walking in Nairobi CBD. I was with my son and daughter. They were young. I think one was maybe 2 years old and the other one 6 years old. And we were just walking, the two of us. And as we were walking, two gentlemen passed by me. They were coming from their office. They were smartly dressed. And I had one telling the other person in Swahili saying, si huyu mtu asukume hawa watoto ushago, meaning this man should just send these children up country to the rural areas, you know. And so in there I saw a couple of assumptions, you know, and some perspectives or stereotypes which were not right, you know. And clearly whoever was saying that is someone who would be very uncomfortable with working with these two children out there without the mother being there, you know. And those are things that need to be undone. And the way to undo it really is to tell the person, look, I mean, if you want to live in the modern world, if you want to have a modern job, if you want to live in a modern city, then you need to also live in a modern way, you know. You can't want everything else modern, but when it comes to fatherhood, you want it the old ways. And the old ways are not necessarily bad. I mean, there are many, many good things, you know, in the old way. But we're just talking about sharing responsibilities, because remember, in the olden days, the mothers would probably stay with the children. They would maybe fetch the water, firewood, while the men went out hunting and doing other things. So there was still shared responsibility. It was not that the man sits at home doing nothing while the wife is doing everything. No, that's not the traditional way. Everybody had their roles, and as roles change, you know, in terms of how economically we are providing for the family or financially, then we also need to adapt. And that is just a message that men have to speak to each other. And I'm happy, Evans, that you have this Father's Den, and I believe one of the objectives of the Father's Den is to remove some of these beliefs and stereotypes and prepare young people, young fathers, current fathers, even old fathers, to do fatherhood the right way.
Very well. Talking of stereotypes, as a man, as a dad, you're told to sit down with your problems. Those are your problems. Who do we call for help as fathers? Maybe from your experience, who do you talk? Who is your sounding board in this particular journey?
Well, I would first of all say that fatherhood is not a stereotype. It's a story that we write every day. I know we've talked about stereotypes before, coming from the cultural aspects, but certainly when you are a father, you will be stuck with situations which you don't know how to overcome. And you don't know, should I call my brother, if you have brothers, should I call my father or uncles and all that. And sometimes we may have people who we could call, but we are afraid to call them because you are afraid to show some of the weaknesses that you're having, some of the failures, you know, some of your inabilities and inadequacies. You're afraid to show those. And so you're stuck with your problem, with your situation of fatherhood, and eventually it eats you up. And I think this kind of forum that you're having, the Father's Den, is to tell fathers that, look, it's okay to reach out for help. It's okay to seek help. And what I would tell fathers is to look for programs on parenting. Generally, it's covered under parenting. You'll maybe not see a fatherhood program as such, but you could read books. For example, Dr. Miles Monroe has written a book called The Principles of Fatherhood, or the Fatherhood Principle, which you could read together with other men, or you could join some training programs. A lot of churches would have this kind of programs on raising future parents, like, say, for example, Dr. Mukolwe and others, Leah in one of the churches. And so what I would say is that let's try to look for help. And then you'll find it's going to be easy, but it's good to come together to find a community of other fathers that you can walk this journey together with. Our ladies have been very good at that, but for the men, we are lone rangers in most cases, and then we suffer alone.
Yeah, painfully so. And one thing, Lawrence, you're very particular about is vulnerability. And I believe from vulnerability, we build trust, and you can also be able to build conversations that are meaningful. So in this respect, how do you think, or what do you think leaders, fathers who are leaders in different positions, like yourself and other, including myself here, how can we work together to champion this conversation, or to break these stereotypes and also build better fathering journeys for different fathers who are coming?
Yeah, I would say that vulnerability is actually the bridge to a successful and free life, if we can accept to be vulnerable. Why? Because when you are vulnerable, then you're able to share your struggles, your weaknesses. And in sharing them, then you're able to get corrective action, advice, or whatever you need to do so that you can overcome. Then that situation, when it presents itself in future, you already know how to overcome it. So for me, vulnerability indeed is the bridge to a successful life. This afternoon, I got a message from my son who's doing his exams. He has 2 exams, one today and one tomorrow. So he sent me a message, a WhatsApp message, and said, "Dad, the math exam was very, very difficult, And then he said, but now I'm studying seriously for the chemistry exam." He was vulnerable enough to let me know that the maths exam was very difficult. And when he's doing this, he knows that there's going to be a reaction from me as a father. I'll tell him you did not prepare sufficiently, or whatever other reactions. But he's vulnerable enough to say that, look, I have a problem. And he's also saying that, look, I'll work hard. So what happens? Next time, we'll just make sure that he prepares sufficiently. And I would urge all men, not just fathers, all men, we've had in many, many forums, that men suffer a lot of mental health situations because of not being vulnerable. So you're dying alone with your problem. And yet, someone else shares out the problem there, they're able to get help, and then they're able to move on. And then we realize that we are all human beings. There's nobody who's perfect. So I would say, let's not die with our issues. Look for someone. And you don't need to tell the whole world. You just need to find someone. And you'll be surprised that you'll talk to someone, and then someone may tell you, by the way, I even had a similar situation, and this is how I went about it. Or I had a similar situation, I'm currently in a similar situation, I also need help. So let's tag team and let's go and look for help. Vulnerability, very, very important.
Absolutely, and in the African setting, we hardly share our stories. And this is actually a major challenge for men, and in particular fathers. Every single time you have a conversation with a dad and ask them, maybe, how is your family doing? Or how are you doing fathering? We usually shy away from these conversations. I don't know, in your own experience, how have you encouraged fellow fathers and men to sort of share hope in the parenting journey or the fatherhood journey?
Yeah. You see, first of all, just going to talk a little bit about the vulnerability. You see, when we have people who've died in the family, the men, in some cases, don't show emotion. They're feeling very sad. You feel like crying, but you don't. In others, they show it openly. when there's a particular struggle, the man doesn't want to show any kind of emotion that is associated with weakness. And I think that's a very wrong way of looking at it. And of course, this is a journey that we have to walk as men. But what I have done with other people, as you know, and actually you've been part of this forum we call the Men's Book Breakfast, where we bring men together to be able to read and study and discuss together. One of the objectives there is to challenge men to take up their roles in society, starting with their family. And I remember at some point we had a guest who came to speak about vulnerability. You know, he spent a whole 20 minutes, you know, defining vulnerability and just talking about it, and gave specific examples of why that is important. And so just to answer your question, in this forum of the Men's Book Breakfast, which has quite a lot of men from different countries, we encourage people to be able to speak up, people to be able to say what the situation is. In fact, we took it a notch higher. In the current season, we asked the men in groups to reach out, just one person reach out to another person during the week and just find out, how are you doing? Well, most of them didn't do it yet. Some of them did, and actually others even reached out to me and told me how they were doing. But I think generally it was thought, yeah, that's a good thing, but we still need to be able to build the trust, to build a safe space where we can show people that it is okay to say, I am not okay, or it is okay not to be okay. So we are taking those steps within our spaces, whichever spaces we are in. And that's what I would encourage all men. Whichever space you are in, whether it's a leadership space, or you're in a space where there are other men, just promote vulnerability and let everyone know that it is okay.